Over the past few months, I've been seeing a lot of comments online saying the drilling offshore Jamaica is either going to cause earthquakes or it already has. Now, that sounds very serious, especially when we felt quite a few earthquakes recently. But here's the thing, these statements are very inaccurate. And when it comes to geology, inaccurate information can create unnecessary fear. So today, let's slow things down and break it apart properly. Before I go any further, we need to answer some fundamental questions. What is a fault? And how do earthquakes happen historically in Jamaica? So, geologically, a fault is a break in a body of rock marked by the relative displacement of rock layers on either side of a surface. So, in layman's terms, there is breakage in rock units, and there is usually movement associated with that breakage, and this can happen over very wide areas. And Jamaica has a lot of faults, both within the island and around the island. Now, here's something important. Jamaica naturally experiences close to 200 earthquakes every year, according to the earthquake unit. We might feel about 10 of them in a year, maybe slightly more in a very active year, but the vast majority happen quietly and are only detected by instruments like seismographs. So, why do we get so many? I actually covered this in one of my seismic YouTube shorts, but here's the summary. Jamaica sits along the boundary between the North American plate and the Caribbean plate within what's called the Gonav microplate. Around us are major fault systems like the Orient Fault, the Septentrional Fault, the Enriquillo Planting Garden Fault Zone, the Walton Fault, and the Cayman Spreading Center. And most of these are strike slip systems, meaning the rocks slide past each other horizontally. That alone generates a lot of natural seismicity. And within Jamaica itself, we also have something called a restraining bend, where the sideways motion creates compression, uplift, and additional faulting. That's part of why we have features like the Blue Mountains and structures along the Wagwater Belt. So earthquakes here are not new. They are part of Jamaica's tectonic setting. Now let's talk about the word that's creating all the anxiety, drilling. If I walk up to someone on the street and I say drill, they're probably going to picture a power tool boring a hole in a wall, and that's fair. When we moved into our apartment about a year ago, my wife wanted to install new curtains. So, of course, I had to drill a few holes, plug them, screw in the brackets, and mount the curtain rods. That's everyday drilling. Geological drilling is similar in a sense. You're creating a hole, but it's controlled, engineered, and measured. In geology, drilling is simply the process of creating a borehole in the subsurface to do several things, one of several things. Extract natural resources like groundwater or oil and gas, retrieve rock cores, collect geological data, install monitoring equipment, among other things. And here's the important part. Drilling is not always about extraction. Sometimes it's purely investigative. It's about understanding what's beneath the surface. Now, this distinction is critical. A production well brings fluids up to the surface. A disposal well or an injection well injects fluids into the ground. Those are very different operations. And when people online say drilling causes earthquakes, they're usually mixing up these processes. The act of drilling, in and of itself, does not cause earthquakes, even if you drill in a fault zone. And why? Well, firstly, it affects a very small volume of rock. Secondly, the vibrations are minor compared to tectonic forces. And thirdly, it does not significantly alter the regional stress fields. So production wells, the ones that bring oil or gas up, almost never trigger earthquakes. Alright, now here's the nuance. I think this is what confuses everybody. Injecting large volumes of fluid underground, especially into deep formations, can trigger what we call induced seismicity. So yes, earthquakes. Here's how it works. Fluid injection increases pore pressure. Increased pore pressure reduces effective stress on faults. If a fault is already close to failure, it can slip. This has happened in parts of Texas and Oklahoma, not because of drilling itself, but because of high volume wastewater injection into disposal wells. That's a very specific scenario. It's not simply drilling that causes earthquakes. It's fluid injection into faulted geology at scale. Now, those of you who follow my journey know that my professional work as a geologist in Jamaica was in minerals and mining, particularly industrial minerals. I have never worked in oil and gas. I know people who do, but I don't have first-hand field stories from that industry like I do in some of my videos, my other videos here on the channel. Everything I'm sharing here is based on secondary sources. So public statements, company materials, media reports, technical briefings, and statements made by the Minister of Energy. Now, as of the time of the recording of this video in February 2026, United Oil and Gas is conducting early stage offshore exploration work, and that includes seismic surveys, surface geological exploration, seafloor mapping, data collection, and they are evaluating hydrocarbon potential. They are not drilling wells for production. They are not extracting oil. They are not injecting fluids into underground systems. This is exploration work. So there's no drill rigs for oil production. There are no boreholes for oil production. And there are no disposal wells. So the idea that current offshore activity is triggering the earthquakes we have been experiencing in Jamaica does not align with what is actually happening right now. In the recent past, Jamaica has had periods where there were a lot of felt earthquakes. I can remember 2023, for example. We had a lot of felt events that year. We have had some in the past which have caused significant damage. In 1692, there was an earthquake in Port Royal. In 1907, there was one in Kingston. And those were the biggest ones. But there were some notable ones too, like 1957 and 1993. And there was a magnitude 5.4 in 2023. Earthquakes here are inevitable, which is why awareness is important. How we build is important. And understanding the geology is important. So to summarize, exploration does not cause earthquakes. Drilling by itself does not cause earthquakes. And production wells for oil and gas very rarely cause earthquakes. What can cause induced seismicity is high volume fluid injection into disposal wells in faulted region, which is not happening in Jamaica. Jamaica is nowhere near production yet, And all the exploration we're currently happening offshore does not cause earthquakes. However, if these current surveys prove something economically viable, and if in the future Jamaica ever reach large scale production of oil and gas one day, the real question should be, how are fluids managed? Are disposal wells being used? And if so, do we understand the underlying fault systems fully? Is proper seismic monitoring in place? And that's the level of conversation we need to be having. Not just simply drilling causes earthquakes or oil extraction causes earthquakes. Because geology is very nuanced. And because fear spreads faster than facts, we have to ensure we get all the facts straight. So that's it for this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.